WorldComEDU. Elite Children's Classics.
World's Literary Masterpieces. Gulliver's Travels. 1. A Voyage to the Land of the Little People. I am Lemuel Gulliver, and I am a doctor. I was born in London. I was the third of 5 brothers. I left school when I was 17 years old because my father was not rich. Several years later, I went to Bristol. I had a friend there. He was the captain of a big ship. One day, he told me that he was going to sail soon for the South Seas and that he needed a doctor on his ship. He asked me to be the doctor on the ship. I wanted to go abroad and see the world, so I accepted his offer. The name of the ship was the Antelope. We set out from Bristol on the 4th of May, 1699. Everything went well at first, but then a very heavy storm carried us off course. The ship struck a rock and began to sink. 5 of the crew and I threw a lifeboat into the sea, but we were not strong enough to manage the boat. Suddenly, a strong wind turned it over and it sank. I swam as hard as possible for a long time. I could see none of the other men. Perhaps they were all drowned. I often put my feet down, but could feel no bottom. The sea was too deep. Finally, I was not able to swim any longer. When I was so tired that I was ready to give up, I suddenly discovered I could touch the bottom. I waded in the shoal almost a mile before I got to dry land. Then I lay down on the short and soft grass. I was very tired, and soon I fell into a very deep sleep. When I awoke, the sun was shining above my head. I was lying on my back. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. Then I found that my arms and legs were tied down to the ground with strings. My hair, too, was pinned down in the same way. After a few minutes, I heard some noise around me. Something climbed onto my leg and crept up to my chin. I turned my eyes only a little. It was a very little man. He was about 6 inches tall. He had a bow and arrow in his hands. He seemed to be a soldier. Then 40 more little people climbed onto me. I thought that they were soldiers too. I was so surprised that I shouted, "Oh!" Then these people were very surprised too. All of them jumped down from my body, but they soon came back. All the time, I was trying to break the ropes. At last, I broke 1 or 2 ropes, and I could move my left arm. I put out my hand and tried to catch some of the little men, but they all ran away before I could catch them. Then I heard a loud shout. I found that they were shooting at me. Some of the arrows went up into the air and came down on my face. They caused me great pain. I did not break any more ropes, and they shot no more arrows at me. I lay still and did not move. Then I heard a sound near my ear. I turned my head a little and saw that they were making a platform beside my head. It was large enough for 4 of the little people to stand upon. It was 1.5 feet high. After the platform was built, several men fetched ladders and climbed up the ladders onto the platform. One of them was older than the others. He was dressed in a beautiful long coat. He said something in a loud voice. I did not understand the words, but I thought he said to me, "We will not do you any harm if you lie still, but you shall die if you don't." So I raised my hand to show that I understood him. I also put my hand to my mouth to show that I wanted something to eat. He gave some orders to the people around me. The little men fetched more ladders and leaned them against my sides. More than 100 people climbed onto me. They carried baskets full of meat. At first, I could not tell what the food was. There were things which looked like mice. They were cooked shoulders, legs, and loins of cows. I found that the things which looked like beans were chickens. I put 2 or 3 loaves of bread in my mouth at the same time. Then I showed them that I wanted something to drink. They brought me a barrel of wine, and they poured it into my mouth. I called for another barrel of wine, and they gave it to me. But when I called for still more, they showed me that they had no more. I finished my meal, and the men brought me some ointment. I put it on my hands and face, because they were still smarting. In a few minutes the pain went away. I was very tired, and soon I fell asleep. The land was called Lilliput. The emperor of Lilliput told his men to make a very big cart because he wanted to take me to the capital city. They had many carts for carrying trees. They also had some larger carts for taking the ships down to the sea. 500 carpenters worked to put many of these carts together, and soon they made one big cart. It was 7 feet long and 4 feet wide, and it had 22 wheels. Tiny horses pulled the cart up to my side. They had to raise me and put me on it. 900 men worked for 3 hours, and at last they raised me onto the cart. 1,500 of the emperor's largest horses were used to pull me to the city. It was half a mile away. All day the horses pulled the cart along the road. In the evening, they stopped and rested. At night, there were 500 men on each side of me. They had bows and arrows. They were ready to shoot me if I tried to move. The next morning, we went on, and at noon, we were near the gates of the city. When we got to the gates of the city, the emperor came out to meet me. There was an old temple not far away from the city. It was the largest temple in the whole country, and the emperor told his men to take me there. The big gate in front was about 4 feet high and 2 feet wide. The emperor's men cut the ropes which tied me to the cart, but they tied my left foot to the ground with very strong chains. I could not run away. I stood up, and all the people were astonished because I was so big. I looked at the fields and houses around me. The country was like a garden. Everything was very small. The tallest tree in the country was only 7 feet high. Then I crept into the temple and lay on the floor, because there was no bed. And the emperor told his men to make me a big bed. They carried 600 of their little beds to the temple and fastened them together. The bed was soon finished. Lots of people came to the temple to see me. The emperor and his men were kind to me. They brought food and drink. And then 6 professors from the university taught me the language of the country. In 3 weeks, I was able to speak their language and learn a great deal about their country, Lilliput. Soon after that, the emperor told 2 officers to look into my pockets. So I picked up the 2 officers and put them into one of my coat pockets. Then I put them into all my other pockets. They found a pencil, a watch, and several other things there. The officers made a list of the things which they had found in my pockets and gave the list to the emperor. He told me to throw down my sword, my pistol, and some other things. The emperor liked my watch very much. He told 2 officers to take it away. They carried it on a pole. My pistol was also very strange to them. The emperor wanted to know how to use it. I had to fire the pistol in front of the emperor and his men. When I shot it, hundreds of small people fell to the ground. The emperor often came to see me in order to learn various things. One day, when I was talking with the emperor, a messenger came to him. The messenger said to the emperor, When we were walking along the shore, we found something huge and black. Nobody knows what it is. It may be some great sea beast, but it is not alive, for it doesn't move. Soon I learned that the strange thing was my hat. I was wearing it when I was in the water, but I lost it when I was up on the shore. The emperor told some men to bring it to him. The next day they made 2 holes in the brim and fastened a piece of rope to the thing and tied the rope to 5 horses. The horses pulled the hat for half a mile. A few days later, the emperor said to me, "I want to train my army, and I need your help. Stand up with your legs apart." I obeyed his order. Then the whole army marched between my legs, and 1,000 soldiers rode their horses between my legs. How beautiful this sight was! Every day I said to the emperor, "I want to be free to walk about." At last he took off the chains. "I would like to go and see the city first. I think I can walk there in a few minutes," I said. There were a lot of people in the city. The emperor told the people to stay in their houses. There was a wall around the city. It was 2.5 feet high and 11 inches wide. I stepped over the wall and walked along the wide streets carefully. The side streets were very narrow, and I could not walk down them. Lots of people were looking out of their windows at me. They said, "How tall and big he is!" There was a very beautiful palace in the center of the city. The emperor and his family lived there. I wanted to look inside the palace. I lay down in one of the gardens and looked through the windows. I saw the empress and her young princess on the balcony. They were very pleased with my visit. One morning, a messenger from the emperor came to see me. "The emperor needs your help," he said. "The people who live in Blefusco are going to attack us. Blefusco is an island across the sea. It is not very far away." "Why are Lilliput and Blefusco at war?" I asked. "Because the people in Blefusco break their eggs at the bigger end, and we break our eggs at the smaller end," he replied. "They don't like our way of breaking eggs. The emperor of Blefusco wants to make us break them at the bigger end, but we don't want to." When I heard this, I thought it was not an important matter at all, but I agreed to help them anyway. Then I walked to the shore and looked at the harbor of Blefusco. A great many ships were there. There were about 50 in all. They were ready to sail for Lilliput and go to war. I had a bright idea. I came back to the capital. I met some captains of the ships and asked them how deep the sea was between the island of Lilliput and the island of Blefusco. They told me it was about 6 feet at the deepest part. I bent some iron bars and made 50 hooks. I fastened each hook to a piece of strong rope. I walked back to the shore with the hooks and rope. I took off my shoes, stockings, and coat and walked into the sea. In half an hour, I reached the harbor of Blefusco and saw their ships. When they saw me, many of the little sailors were frightened and jumped out of their ships into the water. I then fastened a hook and a rope to the front part of each ship. I tried to pull the ships away from the harbor, but they would not move. While I was doing this, they began to shoot their arrows at me. Many of the shots hit my hands and my face, so I put on my glasses to defend my eyes from the arrows. Next, I took out my knife and cut the anchor cables. Then I waded to the middle of the sea. I took the other end of the rope and pulled. I could then draw them after me. Finally, I returned safely to Lilliput. The emperor and his men were waiting for me on the shore. When they saw me and the enemy's ships, they were very pleased. The emperor gave me the highest rank in the country. "Go back to Blefusco and bring some more ships," he said to me. The emperor of Lilliput wanted to conquer Blefusco and make the people his slaves. I did not like this plan. I won't go there, I said. Then the emperor got angry, and he and his men went away. Soon the emperor of Blefusco wished to end the war. He sent some of his men to Lilliput to make peace between the countries. Thus, the war came to an end. One day, the emperor of Blefusco sent a letter to me. It was a letter asking me to visit his country. I wanted to go there. When the emperor of Lilliput heard this, he got angry again. He ordered his men to drive me out of the country. I was very angry and made up my mind to go to Blefusco. Then I took off my clothes and put them in the biggest ship. I swam to Blefusco. I was welcomed by the emperor of Blefusco. We soon became good friends. 3 days after that, while walking along the coast, I found something large floating on the sea, about a mile away from the shore. It looked like a boat. I took off my shoes and waded to it. Soon I came near it. It really was a boat. The boat was upside down. I ran back to the emperor and asked him to send 20 of his largest ships and 2,000 men to tug the boat to the shore. With the help of his men and his ships, I could bring it onto the shore. The people were very surprised when they saw the big boat. I will get ready to go back to England, I said to the emperor. The emperor was very sad when he heard this, but at last he agreed with me. I thanked him very much for his kindness and began to prepare to set sail for England. First, 500 workmen made 2 sails. Then I cut down some of the largest trees and made 2 oars and a mast. I found a huge stone for an anchor. After a few days, all was ready. I took 6 cows and some sheep with me in the boat. I set out on September 24th, 1701. The emperor and the empress waved goodbye to me. On the 3rd day, I saw a big ship to the southeast. I called out to the ship. The ship was moving very slowly, and I sailed my boat alongside it. They raised a flag. My heart was full of happiness when I saw the English flag. I put my cows and sheep into my pocket and climbed on board the ship. The ship was on her way home to England. The captain was an Englishman and was named John Bedell. He was very kind to me. Among his men I found an old friend of mine. He told the captain who I was. I told my strange story as quickly as possible. At first, the captain and his men could not believe my story. Then I took out the cows and sheep from my pocket and showed them to the sailors. They were very surprised and began to believe me. One day, one of my sheep was eaten by the mice on the ship. The rest of them and the cows were alive when I arrived in England on April 13th, 1702. I sold some of them and got plenty of money.
This is the end of Side A. Please turn to Side B.
Two, A Voyage to the Land of the Giant. I stayed with my wife and family for 2 months, and then I made another voyage. I took a ship named Adventure. We were at sea in the Adventure for a few months, but one day we met with a big storm. The strong wind blew the ship off course, and we were lost. After a few weeks, we saw dry land. I got into a little boat with 12 men and got to the shore. We wanted some fresh water to drink. I left the other men and went to look for some water by myself. When I returned, they were already in the boat and were rowing very fast back to the ship. Then I saw a huge giant running after them. He tried to catch the men in the boat, and they only just got away. I was very surprised and ran into the fields. Everything was very big. The grass was as tall as I. Suddenly, another giant found me. He picked me up, took me to a very big house, and showed me to his master. His master was a rich farmer in Brobdingnag, the land of the giants. He had a daughter who was called Glumdalclitch in their language, or Little Nurse. She was about 9 years old. They sat around me to look at me carefully. They spoke to me. How loud their voices were! I couldn't understand them at all. The farmer made a big box and put me inside it and told his daughter to take care of me. She was very kind to me. She was very fond of sewing and washing. She sometimes made shirts for me, and sometimes she taught me the language of the country. I learned a lot of words in a few days. One day, they took me to the town. When we got to an inn, the farmer went inside and put my box on a big table. I walked out of my box and stood on the table. All the giants laughed at me because I was so small. The farmer was very greedy. He told me to work hard for him. He was going to take me to Lordbrogrud, the capital city of Brobdingnag. He thought that he could get a lot of money from the giants who would come to look at me. We rode on a huge horse. Glumdalclitch carried me in my box. On our way to the capital, the farmer sometimes performed some shows. It took us about 10 weeks to get to the capital. After we arrived in the city, my master showed me to many more giants. I talked and walked about on a table. I had to work hard to satisfy a lot of people so that they might give money to the farmer. After a few weeks, the queen heard of me and told a servant to bring me to the palace. We went there. Then she asked me if I would live in the palace. Of course, I agreed with her. So she gave a lot of money to the farmer. Glumdalclitch stayed with me as my nurse. The queen made a new box for me, and inside there were 2 chairs, 2 tables, and a bed. One day, some wasps flew into my box because the window of my box was left open. They were as big as birds. I was very frightened. I drew my sword and fought against them. I killed 4 of them with my sword, and the others flew away. Once I was sitting on a lawn in front of the palace, and it began to hail. The hailstones were as big as tennis balls. Some of them hit me, and I fell to the ground. I had to stay in bed for 10 days because I was very bruised. I often dreamed about ships and sailing. One day I told the queen that I wanted a boat, so she told one of the carpenters to make a boat for me. He was very skillful and good at making boats. He finished the boat in 10 days. It had a sail and oars. He showed it to the queen. She was very pleased and said to him, "Please make a large tank for the boat." He made the tank and put it in a room in the palace. Glumdalclitch lifted me up and put me in my little boat. Sometimes I put up my sail, and the queen waved her fan to make a breeze for me. After that, Glumdalclitch always picked up my boat. She carried it to her room and hung it on a nail to dry. One day, when I was sailing my boat in the tank, a huge frog jumped into my boat. The frog hopped up and down and nearly overturned the boat. I do not like frogs. I hit the frog with one of my oars, and it jumped back into the water. One day as I was sitting in my box, I didn't notice the window was left open. Then a monkey looked in, got hold of my coat, and pulled me out of the box. It was as big as an elephant. It climbed up the drain pipe with me and sat on the roof of the palace. Soon the men found us, fetched some ladders, and climbed onto the palace roof. The monkey was afraid of the men, and it ran away. I had to stay up there alone for a while. One of the men picked me up and put me in his pocket. He took me down the ladder. I was very bruised and had to stay in bed for 2 weeks. One afternoon, when I was better, I played the spinet. The king and queen listened, but the spinet was too big for me to play. One of the servants put a bench in front of the spinet. I ran along the bench and banged the keys with a stick to play a tune. I lived in Brobdingnag for 2 years, and this is how I got away. One day, the king and queen went on a long journey. They went to the south coast of the land. Glumdalclitch and some servants went with them. Of course, I was carried in my box. We stayed for a few days in a city near the sea. Then, Glumdalclitch and I were very tired. She had a bad cold and went to bed. I wanted to look at the sea. I thought this was my last chance to get away. I said to one of the servants, "Please take me to the seashore because I want to breathe fresh air." The servant picked up my box and carried it to the seashore. I looked at the sea out of the small window and said to the servant, "Let me sleep here for a while, and I'll get well soon." The servant shut the door of my box and went away to look for some birds' eggs. I soon fell asleep. Suddenly, I woke up. I felt something lifting my box into the air. I looked out of the window and saw nothing but the clouds and sky. I heard fluttering sounds. "An eagle is holding my box in its beak," I thought. The eagle flew a long way over the sea. Then it let go of my box, and the box fell into the sea. There was a big splash. My box floated on the sea for a few hours. Then the box struck something hard. I thought it had to be a rock. I stood still for a minute, and I heard people talking. My box struck a ship. "Is there anybody inside?" a man shouted. "Yes, please let me out," I cried. The ship's carpenter made a hole in the top of my box. Then he put a ladder into the hole, and I could climb onto the ship. The ship was sailing for England. The sailors asked me a lot of questions. After a few months' voyage, I returned to my wife and family. They were very pleased to see me back safe and sound.
The Sun Tree. Once upon a time, there lived an old woman in a small house near the woods. She had a pretty pet bird. When the people in the village came to her house, the bird said to them, "Good day." Everyone liked the bird. The people liked the woman's small house, too. The house was full of bright and warm light, but the light didn't come from the sun. It came from an apple tree. The tree stood by the door of her house. All year round, this tree was covered with white flowers and golden apples. They gave out wonderful warmth and light. So the tree was called the Sun Tree. The people in the village often called at her house and enjoyed the light from the sun tree. But the land of the old woman's house belonged to the king. When the king heard of her sun tree, he visited her house on horseback. The king saw the white flowers and golden apples of the sun tree. He cried, "How wonderful this tree is! I want to have this tree at any cost. Tomorrow this tree will be carried away by my strong men."
"Oh, King," said the old woman, "the sun tree is mine. I have taken care of the tree since I planted it."
"But it is on my land," said the king.
So it is my tree. It isn't yours.
The old woman said,
It can't grow in another place. Please take one of the seeds.
At first, the king didn't intend to accept her offer. On second thought, he said,
All right, I am going to take a seed from a golden apple, but if the seed won't grow, I'll send my men to get the tree.
The king rode away with the seed. As soon as he reached the palace, he called the best gardener in the country. The king said to him,
Plant this seed and take good care of it.
The gardener planted the seed and watered it every day. He cared for it in the best way he could, but it didn't grow. So early one morning, some strong men of the king's came to the old woman to take the sun tree to the king's palace. The old woman said to them,
Please give one seed to me.
They gave only one seed to her. She planted it and watered it every day. After a few days, a little tree came up from the earth. It grew and grew. At last it grew into another fine new sun tree, but the sun tree in the palace soon died. One morning, the king learned that the old woman had a new sun tree. Early that afternoon, he rode to her house and saw her new sun tree. He was very surprised and thought,
The sun tree needs this land to grow.
So he said to her,
I am going to build a big house here and live in it. In a few months, you must find another home. I have lived here for many years,
said the old woman.
Don't drive me away, please. I can't leave my sun tree. It is my sun tree,
shouted the king. Then the old woman said helplessly,
May I carry a seed with me? Not one seed,
answered the king. The old woman had to move away. One of her friends made a new little house for her near his own house. She thanked him very much. On the day she moved to the new house, the neighbors came to help her. They carried her bed, table, chairs, and a locker. On the way to her new house, the pet bird got out of the cage and flew to the king. The bird said,
Just a moment. You must not build your house here. The sun tree won't grow with you around.
But the king didn't take the bird's advice. In early spring, the king's house was finished, and he decided to hold a housewarming party. On that day, all the noble people in the country wore their best clothes and came to his party. When they reached the house, he showed them many large rooms. The rooms were bright with the light from the sun tree. Suddenly, a girl shouted,
What a strange tree! Look, it can walk and jump!
Everyone looked and cried, The tree is going out of the garden. It is flying high up in the sky. It looked like a big bird. It flew farther and farther. At last the tree stopped in front of the old woman's new little house. The sun tree grew there. This time the king didn't send his men to take the tree away. He knew that not everything on his land was his.
This is the end of Side B.